Brooklyn-based poet Ayala Sela, is that right? And Jersey-based fiction writer John McCaffrey join us for an evening of poetry and prose. Sela will be reading from her collection of poetry soliloquies of a crosswalker, and McCaffrey will be reading from his debut novel, The Book of Ash. After the reading, there will be a discussion with the authors, and then signed copies will be available for purchase. So without further ado, who's coming up first? Ayala? Come on.
The second time that John and I are here at Blue Stockings. The first time was 4 years ago. My book had just come out and I had gotten in touch with John to ask him whether he wanted to write about it for the KGB Lit magazine. And luckily he agreed. And 4 years later, here we are again. So my book is called Soliloquies of a Crosswalker. And it came out in 2011. And today I thought to read to you the poems in more or less of a chronological order, which I don't think I've ever done before. And the first poem I'll read to you is in the section of the book called But Nothing Else Happens. And it's a poem that I wrote when I was 20. I had just graduated college and I was traveling in Europe. And the poem is called Côte d'Azur, and it's the first poem in the book. There is a stone tower between two small towns on the Mediterranean. From atop, a girl is afraid of heights, another steps on glass, and a boy tells stories of the moon and sand ripples in some remote corner of the earth, but nothing else happens. And I thought tonight also to take the opportunity to read some poems which I usually don't read at poetry readings. And so the second poem that I'll read to you tonight was written when I was very young, in my very early 20s, maybe 19 even. I was living in New York and I was still a student. And I think I submitted it somewhere online, and it was one of the first recognitions I received, and they published it on some obscure website. And I usually don't read it, and it's called Whipped Cream. I used to think I was a saint. That night we spoke in a car on the street. I was in your lap. You got hard, I played, and your brother smiled. Later, in that red place with beads and light, I ordered a cappuccino with whipped cream, as I was telling you I was a saint. And by the time I was done, the whipped cream melted. I went back and forth all my life, really, between New York and Israel, but a lot as a child and then again in my early 20s. And this is a poem that I wrote in Haifa, where I was born. And it's called Mozart at the Bahai. Yesterday I walked along the Haifa promenade, an ancient port city, old people unhappy with homesickness, dead spouses, unwashable memories, as a middle-aged, well-dressed Russian immigrant plays Mozart on his keyboard. 3 stools await an audience, wild felines prowl, without a home, without a master, the Baha'i temple at my feet, memories everywhere. And the last poem that I'll read to you from this early chapter is a very short poem, and it may be one of the earliest poems. And it's one that whenever I'm leaving Israel, usually driving on the way to the airport, I always think of this poem. And it's called Haifa Tel Aviv Highway. The birds fly in the sky as the bus drives by, and everything that passes has meaning of the weeks and years that were. And the second chapter in the book is called And All She Does Is Smirk. And it may be the longest chapter in the book, and it contains love poems written about a love affair that ended eventually. And I'll also read to you the shorter poems, which I usually don't read and which are dear to me. And the reason that I don't read them is because I believe that they're meant to be read alone, silently, and not out loud. But nevertheless. And the first one is called Another Napkin. A girl and a boy diluted by anxiety. You like that? He asks on a snowflake clock, and all she does is smirk. And the second one was written in Brooklyn. I had moved into Bushwick for the first time, and I was living in a large loft with 2 cats. And when I first moved in, I wrote this poem. It's called Acrobats. In this strange place, the cats walk along white bricks about 6 meters long, which are piled below huge vertical windows of some old factory. Very urban. When I stare enough of 60 seconds or so, their silhouette becomes one-dimensional, like moving, agile cardboard cutouts, which for some reason reminds me of Paris in the 20s. My cats walk these 6 meters, stopping to smell or looking up in a meow. Every few steps they meet, have a quick greeting, and intercept each other like tightrope acrobats, tail up and swaying elegantly. They continue at this pace, walking, breaking the casual hellos. It is a circus act here in this crazy place we all 3 are newcomers to. The light is good, the stomach is satisfied, and the entertainment is top rate. I had a number of odd jobs my whole life really, but during this time as well. One of them was working at a movie theater. And it's funny that I had a few of these jobs, this one at the movie theater and later in Israel as a hotel receptionist, and although the jobs were very dull and I wasn't at all living up to my potential, the people that came and went gave way to a number of poems. So this one is also very short, and I can dedicate it to Eyal, and it's called My Favorite Poet. I'm working at the cinema reading your book when a guy says, "Light stuff," and I say, "It's not so bad." And he says, "I like him," and I say, "I love him." And the next one is one of the poems that I call maybe a drunken poem. And it's called Devious Semantics. Your green soul and purple antilles soar with the eagles before migration. You land in a northern state, stamp your devious feet everywhere on the 4th level of dust. You find a red trigger, ooze a clean pus into my dirty girl's soul. And the next poem, which I think is maybe the best one, for sure in the chapter, maybe even in the book, is called Gala. Eve once fed me an apple from her garden. Its name was Gala, and I was wearing large green mittens and dirty cream shoes, descending a long escalator in the city after Eden. Adam wasn't there, and we were both pregnant, smoking cigarettes without tar and drinking tall silver cans of Japanese beer after the night of the lunar eclipse. I think Adam was off somewhere reading about socialism and punk rock on the toilet, but we weren't sure. And then there was a power outage in the city a very long time ago. I think it was 2002 or something like that. And I wrote a poem called AC. There is a power outage in the city tonight. It smells like coals burning and the stars are more than ever. I can shower, flush the toilet, bite my nails, and sleep. But like all the milk and all of the ice cream, it's too hot, as the flashlights keep flickering like searching helicopters. And soon they will shine the light on me writing this note, and my kitten perched on the AC, listening to the children's voices, yearning for play. my dear kitten who is still alive today and 14 years old. And the next chapter in the book was when I went back to Israel after 20 years, and I moved around a lot. And this poem was written when I was living in Tel Aviv with 2 cats and 2 dogs on a rooftop in Florentine in an apartment the size of a closet with no air conditioning. And it's called 5767. My cat cuddles more on Saturdays, though she knows. Even the dogs aren't begging for a walk. They're content that there are no construction workers and horns honking and yelling and screaming of all kinds. The new year has landed us this silence and the first raindrops too, and everyone is sitting in some family living room. The only place open is the corner store on Abarbanel, where we used to buy ice cream before or after our trips. Now it's my usual hangout. When I get enough energy, I'll make my way there for some stale pastries, bad coffee, and free internet service. On the way, there'll be the playing of a clarinet. Then I'll send you this poem, give the dogs a brushing, and find the sea from another direction. And one of the earlier poems that I wrote in this period was before I settled down in any home. I was roaming around the country a lot. And this one was written also in Haifa, my hometown. I don't think I've ever read it at a reading before, but it's also kind of one of my favorites. And it's called "My Ups and Downs Are Like That of a Lazy Man Who Walks Outside and Sees the Moon." The security guard dangles his metal detector, bored to death. I go to use the restroom as a feline nurses my shirt, and when I return, there are chips scattered on the table, and the guard has stood up to shake his head at me. There has been some activity tonight. And this is also one that I wrote in Haifa. It's called Java. In a chic 24-hour cafe on the way to the beach, there is a sexy cashier, and buying some coffee is an old lady with a number still tattooed on her left forearm. Tel Aviv, 3:38. In a few hours I'm off to London and then to the city, except today there's still live music at the Boom Bar and tall glasses of Tuborg and camouflage trousers that if you please you can rip. And the taxi driver, which I always shotgun here, says, "My brother has an Irish wife who's really Catholic, but they seem to get along okay." To which I reply, "That's all that matters." And he says, "The trick is to bend down without it hurting." That's also the first time I ever read that poem out loud. And then I worked as a hotel receptionist on the banks of the Kinneret, the Lake of Galilee. Also a very dull job, but the Kinneret is surrounded by numerous holy sites, so it attracts a lot of Christian pilgrims. And this is a story about one of them. It's called Doris. The socket flares each time upon ejection, day or night. The pilgrims send postcards home via reception with words that Jesus and his disciples are still walking the banks of the lake. Then a Swiss gentleman approaches the counter with his perfect Hebrew and asks for whipped cream instead of a safe deposit box, and we smile together at his mistake. And van number 39 makes a trip to the fish restaurant to pick up Doris, who missed the sights today because of chest pains. She invites me for coffee on the promenade, and although I'm on duty, there's no hesitation. And we sit, and she tells me stories of Yeshua and his resurrection, and of the gentleman whose great aunt hid Jews in the war and spoke of nothing when the police arrived. And a cat climbs onto our laps as the sun begins to set and the fishermen walk past. She gives me her only copy of the Gospels as a gift and hopes she hasn't offended me. She believes it was fate that we met today. And later they gather at the bar to sing songs, and the whipped cream man plays guitar and his beautiful wife plays a wooden flute, and all the songs are sung in French and Hebrew. I have practiced my French today, typed from right to left, and told no one of the kitten who snuck inside for a rest on the couches. And then after many years and probably many homes, I ended up in Tel Aviv, and I met a girl, and I wrote 2 poems, of which I'll read you one. It's called Going Down. I remember undressing you in my small, empty bedroom in the middle of the night. I remember the calming sensation of being sober next to you that first time. It was summer and I was living in an industrial neighborhood, losing my virginity again at 29. I remember lying next to you and listening to your voice go on and on until we kissed. I remember smiling as I saw you pull off your panties with your feet and wrinkle your brow. I waited many years for a woman like you, and when you arrived, I touched all of you as if I'd always been there. And then came fall, and I moved into a smaller place on a street named after a Frenchman, and a week ago today, we had a marathon of sorts here. And since then, I haven't seen you. And the last poem I'll read today is called Soliloquies of the Crosswalker, like the book. And it's the last poem that I wrote before finally making it back to New York to bind my poetry. Soliloquies of a Crosswalker. There is a heat wave today, and it makes my thoughts even more unsteady. And from the look of me, one can tell I've had some action, so that the desperation is off for just a bit, and the meaningless storytelling on pause. And I am a bit high with the notion that perhaps, for a moment, I belong to the human race. So thank you for listening. Thanks for coming. Thanks to John. And thanks to Blue Stockings for having us. And I'm happy over.
That was lovely. You know, thank you, Ayala, for inviting me again, because she told some. I just told these guys, like, I think it was like 5 years ago when we read.
Yeah, 4.
4, and I was sweaty then, and I'm sweaty now. And I'll be sweaty. How do we raise this?
Unscrew it, Johnny. Unscrew the base. You got free range. He's got it.
Out of town now, too. You good? I see my wife. So thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate a Friday night and a beautiful night coming down to hear us, so it's very kind. And I always feel good because I see people out, and I do so many of these things, and it's always someone new who comes, and like, you know, my college friends came today, and, you know, there's always someone new, and it kind of makes me feel good. And I appreciate it every time. And so this book now is 2 years old. It's in its terrible 2s. It's sold 2 copies, which is really good. So. But, you know, it was my first book, so I hope it's not my last one. And so I feel good. You know, it's like your kid. You know, you just brag about it. You like, even if they're horrible, right? You know, even if that's on the Facebook, you know, look at my darling kid did, you know, he's stabbing someone, you know. But so it's not a perfect book at all, but it's perfect for me. And one, a lot of people ask, is that me on the cover? Yes. But I like the cover. And what we're going to do, I'm going to read the first chapter, and then my writing partner and a great actor and friend, Jack Quantley, because Jack has always believed in this book, and he took it upon, well, I actually asked him to do it, but he wrote an adaptation, a screenplay, a play, and we're working on it hard. And so we're going to do a little scene from it, so I always think that's kind of fun. But just quickly about the book, and some of you read it, and some of you haven't, and that's okay. But one, you know, I wrote it, the idea came right after 9/11, and I was personally kind of like in a different place, and I lived in Hoboken, which I still do, and I would go and look at the World Trade Center and smoke every night, and it was just really feeling sad. And, I was like, well, what can we do as a people? And there was vengeance, we should kill everyone in the world for this. And part of me felt that. And then part of me felt like maybe that's not the answer. And I had all kinds of conflict. And then one night I saw the smoke had finally kind of dissipated. And it was September, it was fall. And I saw a line of geese flying south. And they were in a perfect V, and they were just so pretty. And I thought, well, at least there's sanity in the world. The nature knows what it's doing. It just keeps going, and it gave me a little hope. So I thought I'd write something about it. So I started with this idea. I work in a mental health treatment facility. I've been in therapy forever and all that. So I thought, well, if the individual is healthy, then the world is healthy. So I said, that's the answer. We've got to make every person mentally healthy. So I set about writing about a place that the society makes everyone be mentally healthy. And my particular skeptical bent realized you can't make anyone be anything. And so the book started kind of turning into a more like, it's a dystopia, and it kind of turned a little bit like, if you try to make people mentally healthy, they're going to be the exact opposite. So it's kind of kooky and crazy. But the semblance of it, I always think, that has merit in this book is this idea of miracles. And my main character is a miracle counselor. So in this world, they want people to see miracles. They want people to see miracles in the mundane. And it's Baldwin's job, my main character, to see people come in and they say, I have a miracle. Well, what's your miracle? And they tell him, and if he thinks it's a miracle, he gives them monetary reward. If it's not, he doesn't. And people are always coming in with the craziest things. And I thought about that, and I like that, because I think in this world of ours, we forget everything is a miracle. Me coming across from the PATH train here and sweating is a miracle. I made it alive. That I see my college friends, that's a miracle. It's all how you look at it. So that's my little 2-cent psychology, what would you call it, new agey kind of feel. But Jack's a miracle, It's a miracle my wife is still with me. I love her very dearly. And all my friends. So thank you. So I'm going to read the first chapter, and then you'll come up and read it. And it's a short chapter. Okay. Baldwin Wallace was alone in bed, reading from the Book of Ash. He was also anxiously waiting for his wife to return home. Reading was not helping him to relax or to forget that Nadine was late again. They fought about the issue just the night before. Perhaps fought was not the best description for what happened, as it implied a give and take between opposing parties with the mutual intent to harm. Certainly Nadine, with voice and hands, fought with such purpose. But Baldwin, consistent to his careful upbringing and non-aggressive nature, mostly listened and ducked. Their disagreement, as he saw it, started with a simple question, which he posed to Nadine while she was unchanging in their bedroom, having finally come home well past the moonrise gong. Do you still love me? Nadine's response was to throw her clogs at his head, and when they missed, to hurl accusations at him instead. These found their mark, controlling, needy, and suffocating. Words said with striking force, knocked him back against the headboard and sent the candle on an adjoining nightstand tumbling to the floor. After the initial shock subsided, he gathered himself to rescue the flame, while Nadine, perhaps to emphasize her claims and give them a visual context, ripped off her shirt and used it to fashion a garrote around her neck. Luckily, he was able to light the candle before it burned out, and by its light untied the knot and removed the garment just as Nadine was beginning to lose consciousness. Understandably, they talked no more that night, or the next morning, except for Nadine blaming him for her not sleeping well and thus feeling too weak to meet the increasing demands of her utility. In her defense, it was a stressful time in the circle, a place named not for its rounded shape or curvy topography. The terrain was mostly flat, often sunken, and the borders formed a near-perfect square, but because of the unified commitment of the citizens to be, well, unified. The cause of the current uproar was the looming day of no consequence, the lone holiday in the circle's calendar when men and women, and children over the age of 5, were encouraged to let loose with fury, to relieve latent hostilities, to reclaim a peaceful mindset through violence and mayhem. By the way, the Purge stole my idea. So, preparing for this carnage kept everyone busy, but none more than Nadine. As a hygiene counselor, her main duty was to maintain the aesthetic integrity of keratin, the hard protein that constituted the human nail. Most of her clients were women who wanted a simple smoothing of the free edges, or a light polish to fortify the nail plate. But around the day of no consequence, their beautification needs grew more mysterious and more complex. Baldwin remembered Nadine telling about an older lady who asked that each of her toenails be filed into 3 sections, the center flat, the boarding sides dagger-shaped. It took considerable effort, but when finished, each foot had the capacity to puncture and tear through the toughest flesh. Yet Nadine doubted this possible, given that the woman was quite infirmed, practically immobile because of swollen knees and ankles, and certainly unable to kick anyone with tenacity. Perhaps, Nadine reasoned, the style was selected more as a deterrent than a weapon, a facade to scare away anyone who wanted to do her harm. While Baldwin did not doubt that Nadine was being overworked, never before in their 5 years of romantic union had the day of no consequence caused her to be this consistently late. He had a feeling something else was involved, some other element that was taking up her time, but he dared not ask what it was for fear he might reignite her anger and trigger another traumatic scene. But holding everything in was killing him. His nerves, erratic during the best of times, were shot, and the loneliness he felt was compounded by the idea that he was not supposed to feel lonely. It was something his life counselor, Harold, often said in sessions, that loneliness is most felt by those who are not alone. Baldwin never fully understood the meaning of this before, but he did now, feeling that he was in a relationship without having one. This was probably why he had sought out affirmation, "Do you still love me?" the night before. He hoped Nadine did, not because of any great happiness he derived from their union, because he could not endure an even greater unhappiness from it. His only hope was that she might change, or at least go back to the way she was early on, when she seemed content with domestic predictability, enjoying with him the intimate rituals of a couple, such as sharing the evening's edibles bag, discussing the utilities and people they disliked, kissing each other with eyes open when the moon was waxing, and with eyes closed when it was waning. Perhaps a day of no consequence would help. While Baldwin had never partaken in the frenzy, he did value the holiday's ability to create closeness, the fear of attack often encouraging friends, couples, families, even strangers, to come together, to work together, to hide together, to unite under one common powerful purpose, survival. While violence ruled the open spaces, love often bloomed in the hidden ones, and after each holiday, stories came forth of new romances forged and old romances repaired. Baldwin took a moment to visualize this happening with Nadine. He imagined spending a day with her, barricaded inside their unit, talking through problems, reconnecting and reigniting passions, kissing freely, whatever the moon phase, and finally making love. The thought triggered an erection. He watched as a section of the sheet covering his waist rose. He savored the moment. It felt good to think of Nadine this way, to connect her with pleasure and not just pain. But the feeling was fleeting. The sheet began to descend, and with it his mood. Finally, he turned his attention back to the Book of Ash. He had completed the last of the text's 100 encouragements the night prior, right before Nadine had come home. Now, as he was trained to do by his stepfather, he backtracked to the beginning, to work through the list anew, but a tinge of rebellion caught him by surprise, and after a quick glance around the room to make sure no one was watching, he sifted through the pages until he stopped somewhere near the middle. Still feeling paranoid about jumping ahead, and also a little guilty, he began to read just as the circle encouraged, one word at a time. Encouragement 44, cultivate rejection. Strive for success and you strive for failure. While this may seem illogical, if you truly contemplate the result of success in your life, you will find the axiom has merit. Take work, for example. To secure employment or gain promotion once hired, you usually must beat out someone for the job. Your win will be their loss. While victory is pleasing to the victor, the feeling holds no lasting value. The practice of competition for reward isolates spirit, encourages selfishness, and gives rise to narcissism. Once an inner-focused mindset takes hold, it is difficult to see beyond the boundaries of one's flesh, and with each passing day, the quest for individual satisfaction overwhelms any other desire. Losing the ability to be empathic, it is easy to grow paranoid and suspicious, to devolve into a bitter, angry, untrusting person. In other words, a failure. To avoid this fate, you must treat success as the enemy and excise its dangerous pull from your mind. A simple way to accomplish this is to cultivate rejection. For instance, never marry someone you desire or who desires you. Better to bond with a person who finds you unappealing and who you find unappealing. Fueled by dissatisfaction, you will work hard to find interests outside your relationship to occupy your time, becoming in the process a more complete person, a more autonomous individual, someone whose emotional health is not tethered to the whim of their partner. Thus, what might be perceived as failure, spending time with someone you hate, will ultimately lead you to a rich and fulfilling life. You will be a success. Reaction step. The next time someone compliments you, explain why you don't deserve the praise, how their words threaten your attainment of a balanced and enlightened spirit, then punch them. The punch, 4 knuckles and a chubby thumb, came at his forehead. It was delivered by Simon, who lived down the hall, and the only other unit in the floor. His neighbor, as usual, was wearing only underwear, a sequined blue thong that squeezed tight against his wide waist and plump thighs. He also had on matching heels, giving him just enough height not to appear short.
Sorry about that.
It's my fault for not looking through the peephole.
It appears you caught me mid-knock.
I should know better.
Try now. Anyway, I'm grateful to see you.
Likewise.
Don't lie.
I'm not.
Anyway, have a moment. I have a favor to ask. I have a favor to ask.
Can it wait? I'm in a rush.
I won't hold you long.
You sure it can't wait?
Yes.
You mean we can talk later?
No! I
What?
mean, it can't wait.
What's the favor?
Did I say favor? I meant to say opportunity. I misspoke. I do that sometimes with F words.
What's the opportunity?
First, what'd you get last night?
What?
Edibles. What'd you get?
The usual plant matter and protein.
Tell me.
Green beans, squirrel jerky, and a honey ball.
I got 3 apples, 2 olives, and a smoked garter snake. There's no way to make a coherent meal from that. Plus, I always get indigestion when I eat that number.
Well, they say food distribution is a random process.
But they don't mean it. I wish nutrition counselors would admit they play favorites. I know for a fact ours hates me.
I'm sure they don't hate you.
You never think anyone hates you.
Simon, I have to get to my utility.
I never let a job dictate my day. That is when I had one. And if your father was my father, I would never have one.
Stepfather.
I misspoke again. But that fact is obvious. He's a force I want to submit to. Smoldering, a little terrifying. He makes my head sizzle. You, not so much. Besides, you look terrible. You work too hard. Or maybe it's your genes. They make your legs look too short. And that makes your torso look too long. Hey, I have another one. It's red. I'll trade you for some knee socks.
I don't like things touching my feet.
What about Nadine? Not that I see you 2 together anymore.
Shoes, but no socks.
I hate sockless unions. What do you have in your closet?
Only what the circle encourages when it comes to non-essentials.
You think clothing isn't essential?
Don't you? You wear very little of it.
I have a body that begs to be seen. But you shouldn't be shy. You're reasonably fit. You have your hair, no gray, and you're what, in your 40s?
I'm 33.
Really? You dress like someone past the age of counting. I'll get the thong. We can share it.
I'm comfortable in my own pants, thank you.
Don't be upset. You don't have the hips for it anyway. But here's something you can't pass up. I found a time hole last night. It's loaded. Must be the couple's dressing room. Clothes and shoes and sexy stuff.
Sexy stuff?
You know, the stuff people use to make them think they're not alone in bed or that they're with somebody else.
Oh.
I need you to be the rope man tonight. Just lower me in and pull me out. I won't eat today, so I'll be extra light.
So that's the favor?
Opportunity. You get to keep 1 item for every 3 we get, except, of course, knee socks.
You can find someone else.
It has to be you, and it has to be tonight.
Why?
Because it has to.
That's not a reason.
You should just do it, because I'm your neighbor, and I'm asking you a favor.
You said it was an opportunity.
I'm still your neighbor.
Simon, I have to go.
You want to know the real reason I'm asking you? Since you're dying to know, the real reason is you're my only friend.
I am?
At least you talk to me.
I'm sorry, I just can't.
I imagine sexy stuff. Perk up any romantic union, especially one that needed perking.
Simon,
I suppose it might even encourage a little more together time.
I'm sorry.
Well, I know Nadine wouldn't be pleased to hear you passed on an easy chance to fill her closet.
Who would tell?
Well, things get around the circle.
Where's the time hole?
No, I tell you, it'll be cleaned out before lunch. After utility, we'll go together.
I just want to make sure I'm home before Nadine.
I wouldn't worry. We'll meet at Big Birch before sunset gone.
No one else knows? I don't want to go and find an empty hole or an angry conflict outside.
As long as we go tonight, it'll be all ours.
I guess I have to trust you.
Well, trust is a thing best learned, not earned. Don't you agree?
Thank you. Thank you, Jack.